TotalBiscuit of the WoW podcast, blue please on cynicalbrit.com. Well, the beta's over. That was quite a surprise for a lot of us. Literally came out of nowhere. No announcement or anything like that. Yeah, we're closing it, we're done. GG. Okay, cool. Right, well, I have things. Don't worry, I have things to do. No doubt about that. So, this is the footage I managed to record before the beta went down, which is a full run of Heroic Throne of Tides. I'm very happy that I managed to finish this, because not only did I get to see the final boss in the way that it's meant to be done, also got to do the heroic version of probably my favourite instance in Cataclysm. So, we'll be doing all of this. I'll commentate the various bosses and things like that, obviously give you the strategies you're going to need to succeed, show you a couple of wipes, because this is not a walkover, which is good. No doubt about that. Demonstrate that after a few days of not playing WoW, I seem to be playing incredibly badly, at least in the first 5 minutes of this video. But hey, there you go. Congratulations, I broke my own sheep. Oh, man. So we had a LAN this weekend, a bunch of the Cynical Brit sort of fan club or whatever turned up. We had a full LAN center, we booked the whole thing out. It was really great, fantastic. But last night we decided that the best idea would be to play the Battlestar Galactica board game and drink tequila. And the rules were... And you shouldn't do this, kids, incidentally. Every time anything bad happens, you take a drink. No, don't. Just don't. It's the equivalent of doing the same thing, but with the road. It's not safe, let me put it that way. We ended up playing League of Legends at the end of the night with a lot of people blind drunk. It didn't work out very well. We got absolutely stomped to the point where one of the people that was with us raged out so hard, he closed his laptop, then headbutted it, which of course shattered the screen. Yeah, don't do this, kids. That's a terrible idea. So, yeah, when I recorded this, I'm not drunk per se, but a little bit hungover, so not playing so well, but we get back into the swing of things eventually. Anyway. What's to look at in this place? Well, the trash is... It's trickier than it was, let me put it that way. And these guys are going to drop this green gooey stuff on the floor, which will spread out all over the place. Hit the tank fairly hard. But you're going to have to get out of that, otherwise it will kill you, of course. The pack you saw previously is going to require some fairly heavy crowd control and interrupting. Usually those packs come with 2 healer mobs, and if you don't interrupt the heals as you saw, it takes a very long time to kill them. The nice thing about this is they've finally done the elevator, and the elevator might surprise you. And this is the most beautiful instance in the entire game. There's not even a question about it. Just look at that. It's freaking gorgeous. I'll show an awful lot more of that as we go. And yes, indeed, there's the giant squid, Uzamat, who is responsible for a lot of the nonsense here. We will see him again in the final boss fight, which if you have not been in here, of course, if you're not in the beta or whatever, you will not have seen because it's not been on my channel. The elevator is, in fact, as you can see there, a giant jellyfish, and that gives us a nice little opportunity to pan up and see the evil critter outside. He's got about 28 million HP. Spoiler, the final boss... indeed, has 28 million HP. Is there a gimmick involved? Well, yes, I think you can figure that one out. It's going to be interesting to see, and of course, I'm looking forward to showing it to you. We're coming on the first boss right now. What we've got is, it's not so much of a gauntlet, but you do get these odd spawns of sort of deep one murlocs that will come along, and they will annoy you a little bit. They're not particularly tough, but they tend to come in straight after you've done a pull. So you see there they go in, they come. Like I say, it's not necessarily a gauntlet. I don't think you have to go through this at any particular pace, and the pulls aren't all that difficult, but it is kind of nice and cinematic, and you get shouting and all that cool stuff. The music you hear in the background is actually for this area. This was not available when I did my first video, which was all the way back at the start of the beta. It was actually the second instance I ever ran, if you recall correctly. Not that I really need to tell you it's good. Music in WoW is always really odd, because I know a lot of people like to turn it off, and generally speaking, I don't like to do that. I mean, I always have my sound on. I like to have the situational awareness of sound. I think that's actually quite important. I know of people that raid without sound, and I couldn't do it. For instance, I tend not to rely on mods in raiding for warnings of abilities, for instance. I rely on sound clips, because a lot of the Wrath bosses particularly, they have a specific sound clip that is associated with an ability that they're going to use. So when you hear that sound clip, it's just easier for your brain to process that and be ready for it than to have a mod bleating in your face saying, this is going to happen. I'm just not a fan of that, and hey, I think it adds a little bit to the immersion. And then, of course, you've got things like Syndragoza that you would rather turn the voice acting off on permanently. I don't think I need to remind you of that, and I'm sure that you will be very glad not to hear it ever again. Indeed, I believe that was actually the boss that annoyed me so much that I never played ICC again. It wasn't down to difficulty per se, it was more down to the fact that 2 out of 10 of our raid lagged horribly for no apparent reason there. That and the fact that it's boring as sin. I always said with Syndragoza that the fight should have been half as long as twice as intense. I mean, the first phase lasts for so freaking long because it's got too much health. At least it did. It doesn't anymore, of course. You've got the power creep from the new talents, which means you hit harder, and you've also got the fact that you have the 30% buff. Now, I stopped playing before the 5% buff came in, so we know what it was like to have a really long Syndragoza fight, whereby you're doing the first phase, which is incredibly easy, and then, of course, in comes phase 2, and it's a complete panicked mess, and then you end up having to do the first one again. It's incredibly annoying. It reminds me a little bit of doing Cthulhu, actually. We spent a long time on Cthulhu when he first came out, and we got the first phase down. The first phase is not massively hard, but at the time it was very, very unique. There weren't any other fights like that. So you got that down, and then phase 2 was just unbelievable. I mean, there was barely anything like that now. The only other fight that's even remotely similar, as far as I'm concerned, is Yogg-Saron, and even that is not entirely identical. It shouldn't surprise you, though. I mean, they're both old gods. Whatever the case. That phase always went on for too long, and Syndragoza was worse than that. Now, I don't think I need to explain these packs, really. Just CC a couple of them, CC the healers. That's the best bet, honestly. And then just nuke down everything else. You may get this patrol right here, which can make things a little bit dicey. If you can, by the way, either purge, just dispel that bubble shield, or spell steal it. It is helpful, because obviously it's going to be reflecting a lot of stuff and doing damage to you, so it's best that it's not on the NPCs. Generally speaking, the trash in this particular dungeon is good. It's very well balanced, with the exception maybe of one pack that... This even wiped us in the normal mode, actually, and it does the same in heroic. We ended up actually line of sighting them. I don't know if that's intentional, but they're a little bit crazy. Aside from that, though, the trash is really, really good. It's nice and challenging, and it's actually quite fun, which is important. Right, the first boss. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. She's a little bit tricky. She was tricky in the normal mode. She's pretty tricky in the heroic as well. She doesn't do all that much extra, but she does just hit an awful lot harder, and there's less margin for error, which is what you would expect. So, we're going to wipe a couple of times on this, because, like I said, she's not all that easy, and it also comes down to the fact that we did have a disconnection during, I think, either the first or second wipe. I can't actually recall which, but that didn't help matters either. So the priority in this fight is to avoid getting caught in the water spouts. There are two kinds. In phase 1, they are like that. You just saw it right there. It will come out of the floor. If they hit you, they're going to hit you like an absolute truck. She'll also do a shock blast, which can be interrupted, as it turns out. We discovered that a little bit later on. She will also put poison on the floor, which you really want to get out of. It does stay on you for quite some time, so poison cleansing, if you have a shaman, is very useful, and of course any other healing class that can get rid of poison. She will then go into phase 2, and she's going to do this. She's got a shield, and she's going to send out these little cyclones, which are going to catch you. Now, these are quite deceptive, because you think, well, they're quite easy to avoid, but if you're anywhere close to them, they can actually suck you in and then start spinning you. So you'll see a lot of our guys get hit an awful lot. We've got a disconnection right there, which is not helping. You can't hurt her during this. She's got a permanent deflection shield on. She's going to spawn 3 adds, and you're going to need to get rid of those. I would recommend that you CC the 2 casters, then burn down the High Warlord Nagentus clone that is going about his merry business. Get rid of him quickly, nuke him down. Now, bear in mind that this is time-based, so if you don't kill the ads quick enough, she will come out and transition back into phase 1. If there are ads up while she is doing that, that's going to make things an awful lot harder for you. Now, our tank is taking a big battering right here, and I believe our DPS ends up getting killed as well. We're back into phase 2 right here. I die right there, just being sucked into it. And we're all gone so very, very quickly there. It's dangerous. It is not a easy fight, honestly. Now, what I'd like to point out, which should be fairly encouraging for those of you who want challenging fights in 5-man heroics, is that everyone in this group, aside from me, is rolling in raid gear, i.e. full item level 359 pre-mades. I've got full heroic gear on this particular character. I've got raid pre-made as well, but I just happen to have this one on at the time. So, as you can see, overgearing doesn't make a huge amount of difference because there are situations where things can go very, very wrong for you very quickly, which is good. You can't just sit there eating those spouts, for instance. You have to get the hell out of them. The problem with the spouts is not necessarily the amount of damage they do, although that damage is fairly high. You are looking at a situation where you get immobilized. You know, it's a hard disable for a fairly significant amount of time, and there isn't really any way out of it. Like, you can't blink out of it, you can't ice block out of it, you can't, as far as I'm aware, divine shield out of it. There's no gimmick that will allow you to escape that easily, so you do want to watch out. Like I said, you've got to be quick on that DPS as well. If you get that hard disable happening too much to you during Phase 2, then you're going to end up having ads up as well, and particularly if the caster ads start getting into the group and start doing damage, combined with the shock blast, if you don't interrupt that, you're going to get absolutely blasted. So it is problematic. You don't want that to happen, so do try and avoid them if at all possible. What you want to try and do, actually, is try and angle your camera a bit, because it's exactly the same color as the swirling crap in the middle of the actual room, and there's also a lot of it over there, so it's a little bit confusing. So if you angle your camera so that she's in the center of the room, you've got a kind of isometric view going on, you can very easily see the taunts coming out. Now, what you noticed before is that I didn't take any damage. That's because I blinked, the game lagged, and the game knew that I wasn't actually in it, but ended up hard disabling me anyway. So I took no damage, but I still got the hard disable, which is a little bit weird and something they're probably going to figure out right there, but you do have to blink well in advance if you intend to do that. There's one of the spouts going up. That will pretty much kill you. You will get absolutely wrecked if that's the case. And what happened here is we lost that DPS. I'm the only DPS actually up, so yeah, we're done. There's no question about that. Bear in mind that if fights go on too long in Cataclysm, you tend to have problems with your healer running out of mana. That's the most important thing to consider. It's nice, it's good, because it puts a sort of soft enrage timer on a lot of these 5-man fights that wouldn't otherwise be there. For those who don't know what a soft enrage is, it's a mechanic built into the fight which is supposed to punish groups that are performing poorly at a certain point in time, often quite late into the fight. Things you can think of are stuff like the spore bats from Lady Vash, for instance. That's technically a soft enrage. If you don't kill her before the spore bats cover the entire platform in goop, then you're boned. In this case, what you've got is a case of if you don't kill the boss before the healer runs out of mana, and obviously has no other way of regenerating it, probably popped innovate potion, etc, etc, then you're probably also dead as well. Whereas in Wrath, that was not very common, honestly. Healers could just spam heals until the cows came home. Now it's not the case. They don't want that to happen. They want mana management to be very important to healers, and it is. There's no question about that. And you saw what happened in the situation on the second wipe right there on this particular boss. So we're going to take it down this time, though. Like I said, the strategy for the fight is not that hard, but it is a fairly challenging execution encounter, and it's good. It will wipe people, and that's how it should be. And even as overgeared as we are at the moment, it is killing us. It's killed us twice. And these are not bad players we're talking about here. It is a pug, but these are well-spoken individuals, these are well-experienced individuals, and they know what they're doing, and they are communicating with the rest of the group. Mistakes are made. There's no question about that. People do make mistakes. It is very common, unbelievably. I know it shocks some of you. You know, you expect to see perfect play all the time on YouTube, for instance. Maybe all you see is Paragon with their kill attempts, but bear in mind that when you see a Paragon kill video, as skilled and an excellent guild as they are, there were maybe 50 to 100 attempts before that where they didn't do it right, and you don't get to see those. Everyone makes mistakes, and I do mean absolutely everybody. Now, this bit right here, there is a cutscene. You may have seen it before in my first one, but it didn't have music and it didn't have sound effects. It was not complete, and I actually ran it at double speed. So I'm going to give you the full cutscene right here when you activate this particular security module. Enjoy. There you go, folks. We'll see more of him later on. Now, you get to go immediately onto the second boss right here. This is a... yeah, talk about soft in rage. Here's a prime example of that. We've got a guy that drops expanding void zones called Shadow Fissures. He's a little bit like General Vezax, just a little bit. And he's also got a Force Choke ability. The thing is, that's all he really does, but in the heroic version, these Void Zones expand way, way fast. Now, unfortunately, the tank doesn't actually tank it in the right place, and things start to get a bit hectic. The way you're supposed to do this is you take him around the very edge of the area, and everyone sits in the middle. And usually the pool can be used as a safe zone. As you're seeing very clearly right here, that did not actually happen. Now, I honestly thought that this was a complete wipe situation. I mean, look at it. It's, you know, this is a disaster. The placement is all over the shop. It's horrible. And as it turns out, we did manage to find a way of doing it. I don't know if this is intentional, honestly. I don't know if it's supposed to be done this way. It seems very odd if that's the case. There's the force choke right there. It's squeezed. There's nothing you can actually do about that. But handily enough, he actually pulled me to safety, which was probably not what he was trying to do. But hey. So we've got a DPS standing in that, but what we thought was, well, why don't we take him out the door? Now, I would have thought that he would have been tethered and he would have reset here, or the door should have been locked, but it's not. So what you can do is you can take the guy out of the door, and if you have all of the DPS in front of him, you can just drag him down the corridor, dropping these void zones, keep moving, and the DPS can just stand all the way down the corridor, which of course is empty, and just nuke the crap out of him. It's really easy, actually. And I thought that we would be totally screwed, but then once we figured out we could do that, it was an absolute joke. So, yeah, disappointed. Thankfully, it is the only bad boss in this particular area, but I'm sure that's not supposed to happen. Surely there's supposed to be a lockdown on that door, and you're supposed to kite him around the side, and then it's a DPS race to make sure you don't get killed by the soft enrage of those expanding void zones. Like I say, he's not all that exciting. He's got a really cool area. I mean, look at the architecture of this entire place. The Throne of Tides is my favourite dungeon. It's not only is it really well put together, it's very cinematic, but it's so damn unique. Everything looks absolutely wonderful. They've put so much effort into it. And you get to see a lot of special effects, particle effects, and these sort of force field style things that you don't get to see in any other dungeon. You've seen them when we pass the various areas and you see the outside of the ocean. It's really, really cool. Right. Giblins, as I like to call them. They're actually gill goblins. I like to call them giblins, so I'm going to do that. These guys come in AoE packs, and they actually have a really, really powerful conal AoE effect that they will fire towards you. It'll hit you for about 35k. The problem is these packs can get up to about 8 to 10 in size, so you can get nuked down really, really hard. So make sure your tank goes in there first, and make sure your tank's got a nice stack of stuff going on. Now, these guys do have quite a lot of health, so AoEing them down, while still the optimal way of doing things, does take a little bit longer than I would like. It's quite dangerous. Now, this gets more dangerous when you have to deal with these dudes, these giant sort of behemoth kind of fellows. Now, I highlighted in the original Throne of Tides video that they have a really cool combo. They haven't got any additional abilities, which I was kind of disappointed about, but their combo is they'll throw you up in the air, and then they're going to dump you down into an immediate ground pound, so you have to move the hell out of that. Now, it does do more damage in the heroic version, but it's still not all that exciting. It's just disappointing that it doesn't expand on an already really cool mechanic. Maybe throw in a third ability there. That was what heroics used to be, if you remember. And they weren't all perfect back in Burning Crusade when they first brought them in, but when they first announced heroic 5-mans, they were going to say, oh, you're going to see all new abilities, and it's going to be much more challenging, blah, blah, blah. You're going to see entirely new mechanics. And that sort of died off, really. And Wrath didn't have an awful lot of that, and even in Cataclysm, you're not seeing too much of it. Not as much as I would like, anyway. But they are still challenging, so I'm okay with that. That pull right there is an absolute freaking nightmare, as you can see. It is really evil. You don't seem to be able to separate them, so you've got to take the gill goblins down as quickly as possible. What I would suggest there is trying to use line of sight to make sure that they can't fire at you initially, because there's quite a bit of range on that typhoon-style thing they throw at you. Get around a corner, line of sight them, bring them in, and then just nuke the crap out of them with everything you've got. And you will take quite a lot of damage from the big giant, but it's the only way to do it. We killed a few there, so it shouldn't be a big deal to clear it out, but these packs are unpleasant. No doubt about that at all. Right, while we take a drink, I think we'll take a break. I'll come back with part 2 right after this. Just means I can start uploading this and I can get onto the second one. My name's been TotalBiscuit, this has been part 1 of Heroic Throne of Tides, and I'll see you in part 2.